and what were the takeaways?
Yeah, Lockwood, I was. It was very much a surreal moment when we were all members of the House and members of the Senate, all in the Visitor Center auditorium, and Zelenskyy was up on the screen talking to us via an interpreter. It was very sobering. It was very sobering. Here you have a young man, 45, I consider that young, a man who is leading his nation. He knows there is a bounty on his head. He knows that the odds are against him fighting a much larger aggressor, but still, he is steadfast. He is not running from the war. He did not take the offer of leaving the country that was given to him. So he is a symbol of strength. He's a symbol of fighting for freedom, and there is consensus. We have a few folks that are not pro-Ukrainian, but he is a symbol worldwide to fight an oppressive aggressor.
Then my next question is your opinion of how we are responding, and if you wish, we can bring in and focus specifically on the commander-in-chief, but your thoughts generally, how are we responding, and what are maybe some of the concerns?
Too little, too late.
Okay.
Too little, too late. What we should have done, and we met 6 weeks ago, we had a joint meeting again, closed-door meeting with Secretary Blinken, Secretary Austin of the Secretary of Defense, Joint Chiefs of Staff Milley, Secretary Interior, Intelligence, talking about what was going on and how the country was being encircled, how Russian had begun cyber warfare a month prior. And the Republicans, specifically Mike McCall, who's the head of Foreign Services, the ranking member Republican, Blinken said, well, if they do this, then we will do this. And in our world, you don't play that way with the bully, because then all of a sudden you're 3 steps behind, and that's where we are. We should have started sanctions long before we did. And why would that be? That would tell the Russian oligarchs who had propped up Putin that their wealth has plummeted. If we had their wealth plummeting prior to them going into Ukraine, I think Putin would not have enjoyed the support that he had from that, and that his stance would have been markedly weakened. Again, we asked Biden to give them much more military support 6 months ago, but they would not. So, it just goes to show that this particular administration is so weak. And here we are at the same time, Lockwood, negotiating with Iran, trying to give them essentially a pathway to a nuclear bomb. I was just in Israel 3 weeks ago. We know this. And who are they using as our intermediary? Russia.
Right.
Russia is the intermediary between the United States and Iran to try to work out an Iran deal. So, I mean, again, you can't make up this stuff.
I was going to say, does that even make sense? How do we go about accommodating that conversation?
No, it's sadly enough, Biden is going to be complicit if Iran gets a nuclear bomb, which they will use against Israel. And who knows who else that they would use it against. If they had ICBMs that could reach the United States, they would not hesitate. Iran would not hesitate to use their nuclear bombs because they see their mission as a religious one, not a political one.
Congressman, the other question goes to of course, the future, how we proceed as we develop relations both with the Ukraine and, of course, other countries around the world. And I'm going to talk about this in relationship to NATO. We'll get to a few other items as well before we wrap things up with you, but this is an important topic. Yesterday, of course, President Zelenskyy acknowledged the importance of the United States and mentioned to the audience, and I guess a message directly to the president, saying, you need to be the leader of the world, please, leader of the world in peace. So my question to you is, what should we be thinking going forward relative to our role in the world, but also how we are being perceived? I've got a little story I want to share with you on that in a moment, but what should we be doing next?
What happened, Lockwood, presidents normally get a honeymoon period. It usually lasts a year, and let them kind of get their feet and everything. Afghanistan was the end of Biden's honeymoon.
Right.
Just remember that scene in The Wizard of Oz where Toto ran and pulled down the curtain and you saw the wizard. That's what happened in Afghanistan. We saw the weakness. He hid in the White House for 3 days. 3 days after the Afghanistan debacle, where we left Americans behind, we left our allies behind, we left $86 billion of American military equipment behind. We left in the middle of the night, all because he wanted to score a political victory on September the 11th, 20 years later. He did this against his generals. He did this against his foreign policy experts. He hid in the White House for 3 days. So this is where the world saw American weakness revealed. And if you didn't think Putin would then turn to his general and said, look, Biden's weak, go ahead and pull those plans to invade Ukraine off the shelf. Let's get going. You didn't think that happened. That's exactly what happened. So the world sees Biden as weak. He's being weak now with Iran. He's being weak with China. We can't even get anything done to try to keep China in check during this administration. They think if we're nice to everybody, all these bullies around the world, they will be nice to us. No, they're not going to be. You have to be strong. And as Reagan said, it is strength. It is peace through strength.
The other aspect, and we'll move on to other items here, Congressman Dr. Greg Murphy with us this afternoon. The topic of world leadership. I was talking to a friend who's an author in the UK. He's an expat living in London. And he mentioned that the president, and right now the United States, but the president for sure, is somewhat a nuisance and a disappointment to the rest of the European community. They were disappointed that the president announced what he would not do in advance of any negotiations with Russia. And as he pointed out, that's the one thing you don't tell your opponent or your enemy, the things that you won't do. That takes any negotiation off the table. So this echoes your comment a moment ago. I want to move on to another item that I think has direct influence on many in our listening audience. And you've expressed some frustration with the IRS commissioner, Commissioner Reddick. Tell us something about this.
Well, it was a very interesting meeting today. The commissioner for the IRS came to be a witness in front of the Oversight Committee of Ways and Means, of which I'm a member. And we asked some pretty hard questions, because if you look at what the IRS is doing now, there are millions of returns, not from this year, which hasn't had their tax year, but from the year prior, that have not been reviewed, that have not been dealt with. And so to the tune of like 10 million. And I asked him specifically, now remember, the average, at least he was said, the average amount that people get as a refund is around $3,400. But if you've got 10 million tax returns that have not been dealt with, just think of the hundreds of millions of dollars that the American government is holding of the American people's money because of inefficiency, et cetera. I asked him how many individuals are still working remotely. And if you want a political answer, he said 100% of the people required to be in place are in place. Well, that wasn't answering the question. They could require 5% of the people to be in place. So right. Again, that's not answering the question. And what the IRS is doing is they're pleading again for more. We need more money. We need more money. They have $1 billion that they have not spent from the pandemic aid. And number one. Number two is they're trying to hire auditors, not people to do tax returns, auditors for people to go after people in their bank accounts and all these other things. So instead of actually doing the work of the people, they're going after the people and treating them as enemies. He's leaving in just a few months. He's retiring. And I hope we get somebody in there that actually restores some efficiency to that huge bureaucracy that we call the IRS.
Well, after the efforts of Lois Lerner, I hope you also will have somebody who will give us a sense of integrity as well in the Department of Internal Revenue Service. The other aspect of this, Dr. Murphy, is the hyperinflation that we're experiencing, and the fact that many families are going to desperately need any outstanding returns or rebates that they are due. This is discouraging, and then, of course, it also brings into question how prepared will the IRS be to handle the 2021 filings?
Sure. Well, here we are, and again, I'm trying to be objective with a lot of those things. They've tried to hire people, but now because wages have gone up all over the place because of so many that stay at home, we're going to pay you more, and then fight for wages, fight for employers, and so wages have gone through the roof. Real wages, on the other hand, Lockwood, have not, because of inflation. But they're competing. You've actually, if you got a 5% raise, that was great. But you really got a 3% decrease because inflation was close to 8%.
Right.
So it's called reality. And so they're trying to get people to come in and work. They're trying to do their best they can. But then again, there's certain inefficiencies that are in that huge bureaucracy that just makes it shakes my head when people want more government. They don't understand how inefficient, how bureaucratic government is. We should have less of it, which is actually, I asked him, do you go after any private industries to come in and help you be more efficient? He said, yes, he did somewhat, but I didn't get a really good answer from that either.
All right. I'm going to ask if you'll take a call. We've got Bob in Moore City. I'm not going to keep Bob here long because I've got one other item I want to bring up, and that, of course, is the announcement today that Governor Cooper has decided to continue the state of emergency. We have had a long emergency.
Unbelievable.
Stand by. Let me first get Bob from Morehead City on the line. Bob, good afternoon. And again, our guest, Congressman Dr. Greg Murphy. Yes, sir.
For a line of time, I would recommend Dr. Murphy we're confiscating ships and monies and bank accounts and so forth from Russia. Recommend that those all be sold on the open market and all that money be given to Ukraine to rebuild their country.
Ooh, very interesting concept. Thank you.
Sounds like an excellent recommendation.
One other thing,
an excellent recommendation. Putin in Russia now is doing things very, very reminiscent of Stalin.
Right.
He's talked about purges of people who are against the state. And if you recall, Stalin killed over 70 million of his people.
Right. Yeah, okay, Bob, you said one other thing before I move on.
Everybody's concerned about why we're negotiating with Iran. Remember, Obama did it the first time, and we think he's behind the scenes pulling the Biden's change. And remember, Valerie Jarrett, Obama's best friend's parents, are still in the hierarchy in Iran.
Okay, thanks very much, Bob. Appreciate the observation on that one. Any final comment on that, Congressman, before I move on to one other item?
Well, sadly enough, Democrats just don't get it. They just don't understand that they cannot trust the Iranians, and they think that if they're fair, they're going to try to take Iran and some of the groups off the terrorist list.
Right.
Are they kidding? Are they kidding? These are terrorists. These are people that openly vow to annihilate Israel, and they want to play nice, thinking that if they do this, the Iranian regime will be nice. It just doesn't happen. Sadly enough, it is Neville Chamberlain all over again.
All right, I want to bring back one other quick note, and for those who are not aware of this, the governor today had a press conference, and he met with his emergency management team, and he announced that he will continue the current state of emergency in North Carolina. Congressman, it's been said that one of the reasons the governor is doing this is so that he can have, or we, the state, can have access to easy federal money. I first off am stunned that there's any easy federal money out there. And then secondly, what exactly is the justification? Do you have any knowledge of that?
It is political justification, Lockwood, 100% political. There's so many things that are being still used now, which in my opinion are wrong. People being paid in certain industries as, quote, a COVID surtax and all these other things. Those should stop. Those should stop immediately. We now are really in the endemic phase. There are no more people in the hospital now than at the lowest point during this pandemic. Are we going to have some more surges? We probably will, just like we have flu surges during the year. And so, no, this is 100% political, but I don't expect anything else from Governor Cooper. Anything else. Everything has a political tint with him, and it is very, very sad.